Chapter 4. Previously on The Real Housewives of New York City. I first meet Alex McCord at Townhouse, David Burke's innovative restaurant on the Upper East Side. My first impression, this woman is a boring Stepford wife. Judgmental? Yes. At this point in my life, I have a tendency to make snap judgments based on first impressions, but this is something about myself that I'm about to learn that I need to change. It's the fall of 2000, and we have just begun filming the first season of The Real Housewives of New York City. I already know or have met all of my castmates with the exception of Alex. The executives at Bravo have planned for us to meet a bit later in the season. But, as often happens in reality television, it doesn't quite work that way. Mario and I have just finished a romantic dinner together and are about to leave the restaurant when I hear Jill Zarin's raspy voice coming up from over the bar. She's waiting to be seated with her reserved, soft-spoken husband, Bobby. Beside them at the bar is a lanky, fair-skinned blonde and a flamboyantly dressed animated man with closely cropped ginger hair. For a moment, I wonder if Jill has replaced her gay husband, Brad, but then I see the man affectionately caressing the blonde's slender back. Oh my God, I think to myself as I scrunch my face in distaste. Are they a couple? Mari and I walk over to the bar and say hello. Jill, who prides herself on connecting people, introduces us to the couple. Ramona, she says, I'd like you to meet Alex McCord, who will be filming the show with us, and her lovely husband, Simon. I am taken aback. This is Alex and Simon, the same Alex and Simon with whom I will be spending the next few months filming. Now that I'm seeing them in person, I suspect the reason Bravo wanted us to meet after we started filming was so that they could capture my initial reaction to them on camera. Too late. Nice to meet you, I say cordially to Alex as I kiss her on the cheek. Alex opens her mouth to speak, and I hear a grating Australian accent. Although I may have had one too many cocktails, I know that voice doesn't belong to Alex. Suddenly, Simon is standing up and talking to me. He drones on and on and on. I'm not even listening to the words coming out of his mouth. I cannot believe that he won't let his wife get a single word in. I interject enthusiastically. So, Alex, are you excited about filming the show? She opens her mouth to respond, but Simon speaks over her and answers the question himself. Alex doesn't seem to be bothered by his interruption. Quite the opposite. To me, she seems like a puppet sitting on her ventriloquist's lap, content to simply sit in the background, smile, and nod her head in agreement. She says nothing. My head is spinning, and it's not from too many cocktails. I'm annoyed by their seemingly codependent dynamic, and I don't even understand why. I try to tell myself to stop judging people I don't even know. How can you jump to conclusions about Alex based on this one encounter? I ask myself, but I can't help it. It bothers me when I perceive a woman is married to a man who doesn't let her talk and directs her every move. Suddenly I see the connection. Their relationship reminds me of my parents' awful marriage, a one-sided partnership where the woman is completely dependent on the man. The way Alex and Simon interact with one another has hit a huge nerve. Right or wrong, it's personal for me, and I'm completely turned off. I do not like them. Mario, I say hastily, we have to go. On the way home, Mario and I discuss the encounter. That was awkward, I say, working myself up into a frenzy. I can't believe that Bravo would cast that woman. She has no personality. She's completely nondescript. She's boring. Mario tries to calm me down. Maybe it was just awkward because you ladies weren't supposed to meet yet. I don't care if we were supposed to meet yet, I snap. It doesn't change the fact that she doesn't appear to be a strong, independent housewife like the rest of us. I pause, roll my eyes, and inhale deeply. This is going to be a long season. Looking back, I now understand that comparing Alex and Simon's marriage with my mother and father's wasn't fair or even rational. Who was I to judge this couple based on one brief encounter at a restaurant bar? For all I knew, Alex was just nervous or shy, or maybe Jill had told her stories that prevented her from warming up to me. It doesn't really matter why she was so reserved. My reaction says more about me at that time than it does about Alex and Simon. At that point in my life, and sometimes even to this day, my unresolved issues often cloud my judgment and blurred my vision when it came to friendships, especially with my fellow housewives. For the next 7 seasons, my relationships with the women on the show, my reactions and behavior, good and bad, would play out on a television before millions of viewers. Although it has been a long, bumpy road, being on the show has been a tremendous learning experience, and I have forged friendships that I will cherish for the rest of my life. While I was excited to do the show, the first season was difficult for me because I had a lot of stress at home that no one knew about. Mario was very ill during the first months of filming. He was having issues with his business, and it had worn him down to the point where it was seriously impacting his health. Meanwhile, I wanted the show to be successful, but I was worried that the other women Bravo had cast weren't going to be entertaining enough. I didn't know Bethany or Alex very well, but what little I had seen of Alex seemed boring. I had known Jill for years, and at the time I saw her as a whiny, materialistic Long Islander. Luann was always very proper and neutral, like Switzerland. I felt like I needed to amp things up. So between what I was going on in my personal life and at home and my desire to have a successful show, I took things too far that season and wasn't entirely myself. The way filming for the show works is that the producers will call me and ask, "What's going on this week, Ramona?" And I'll tell them I'm having a dinner party, attending a fashion show, or having lunch with a friend, and they'll send a camera crew out to film. Everything we film is real. Nothing is ever scripted. No one tells us what to say or do. I wanted my first appearance on the show to be something that would showcase me on my own. So I decided to have a cooking party with my friend Pamela Morgan of Flirting with Flavors. I remember Bravo encouraged me to have Luann stop by so that I would have another housewife there, but it never occurred to me that Jill would get upset that she wasn't invited. It was just supposed to be an intimate gathering for a few of my close friends. I had no clue it would turn into a fiasco that would become a big storyline. I didn't feel like I had done anything wrong, but then that episode aired, I came off like a bitch for not inviting Jill. That was my first experience of how being on a reality show can bite you in the ass and get you into trouble. I had no idea. Maybe I should have, though, because this wasn't the first time we had this issue. Jill and I have always had a volatile friendship. Being on the show has only magnified that dynamic. I knew Jill socially before we started filming. We both had houses in Southampton, so we played tennis and socialized during the summer. We were friendly, but she wasn't a close friend. For years, every Memorial Day weekend, I would throw a party for 30 or 40 people, but I never invited Jill. Then one year, I remember her saying she couldn't believe I didn't invite her to my party. The truth is, I much preferred to have an intimate get together than a huge party where I can't talk to all of my guests. Inviting Jill meant I had to expand my guest list to the point that it wasn't even going to be an intimate gathering anymore. So I ended up having two parties just so I wouldn't hurt her feelings. Since we are both strong willed and outspoken, I had learned to take a back seat and to avoid going head to head with Jill. It's better to let her be strong first, contain my opinion, which is hard for me to do, and wait until she is more receptive to offer her my point of view. I found that when I use this approach, we have been able to resolve our issues peacefully and have ended up learning from one another. Naturally, over the years, there have been many times when I could not contain myself and we would go at it. But at the end of the day, we have tremendous respect for one another. The other big confrontation that first season was at Bethany's dinner party. I left early and she was very upset and hurt by that. I remember that I had told the producers that I had a previous commitment and had to leave early, but it seems that information was never passed on. I should have said to Jill and Bethany directly that I was only coming for part of the evening. I was already frazzled when I got there, so when I saw Simon, I just snapped and was bitchy to him. Bethany took me aside and calmed me down. After that, I came out with a martini to welcome him more graciously. Unfortunately, that didn't make it into the episode. This is another example of how things backfired on me because I feel my actions were taken out of context. Ultimately, though, it doesn't matter. We're all in this to produce a great show. It isn't scripted. When you see on television, is what you see on television is what is really happening in our lives. They can't show everything, so it makes sense for them to choose the most provocative and entertaining moments. That's fine with me because I own my own behavior. It's not perfect. If I react poorly in the moment or if I hurt someone's feelings, I am always willing to apologize and to learn from my mistakes. Life is learning. The reason I have done The Real Housewives of New York City for 7 seasons is because I have fun working and interacting with the other women on the show. I don't do it to be famous or popular. I have no interest in being a celebrity, but there's no avoiding a certain amount of fame and notoriety when you appear on a hit television show. Almost immediately after the first episode aired, people began to recognize me in public. I would be shopping at Bloomingdale's, and people would come up to me and tell me how much they loved me and loved the show. I remember the first time I realized that I could no longer be anonymous in public. I was picking up a sink at a local plumbing store in Southampton, and a man there recognized me. He walked right up to me and told me he loved the show and peppered me with questions about what was going to happen the rest of the season. I had no makeup on, my hair was a mess, and I was wearing an old pair of sweats. I was so mortified that I wanted to hide under my new sink. Eventually, I learned to take my unwanted celebrity in stride. But early on, when people would stop me on the street, I just felt like shrinking into myself. I would try to hide behind Mario and Avery, but they would say, take a picture with them, talk to your fans. That season, I was nominated for Bravo's A-list drama queen, which was awarded to the most popular and entertaining female in a reality television series. And I remember one of the producers saying to me, Ramona, you're the star of this season. I just thought, what are you talking about? What does that even mean? I had no comprehension of how much my life would change. None. When the show first aired, I didn't even know what a blog was. Jill was much savvier about following social media and blogs, but I had no idea about any of that. I still try not to read about myself. There are a lot of bloggers out there who are full of hate. For the most part, I don't let it affect me, but it was harder for Avery. She was 12 when the show first aired, and at the end of the season, she said to me, Mom, there's two sides of you. There's the really sweet and lovable side, and then there's your wild side. Why do you have to show that side? Why can't you show more of the other side? Let someone else be out of control. I acted out more that first season because I wanted a good show. I wanted to be entertaining, so I pushed the envelope by being a little over the top. My being so out there bothered Avery. So for season two, I tried to rein it in a bit. I watched my P's and Q's and I was more sedate. I avoided conflict, but I wasn't having as much fun. All of a sudden, I went from being highly visible in the foreground to fading into the background. I remember at one point, my buyer for HSN said to me, Where's the Ramona I know and love? Who are you this season? That's when I realized that I was overcompensating and had swung too far in the other direction. I wasn't being my true self, which is something that I think a lot of housewives struggle with when they first come on the show. I think during those first two seasons, Luann had the same issue. She was all dignified about being the countess and projecting her persona. On the show, she would never do anything racy or controversial. But the Luann I came to know off the show is really fun and crazy and wild. She drinks and swears and is a very sexy woman. I do think she eventually got more comfortable showing this side of herself. But in the beginning, she was much more reserved on camera. That season, Jill and Bethany became the dynamic duo, the way Sonia and I are now. At the season 2 reunion, I felt like they had teamed up against me. I felt attacked and couldn't get out of bed the next day. For the season 1 reunion episode, we all had our hair and makeup done in one big dressing room. But for this season, I remember Jill insisted that none of us see each other before we sat down to film. Then somehow she and Bethany ended up sharing a dressing room. I assumed she had planned it that way so she and Bethany could have time alone together. My experience that at that reunion felt very abusive. Almost immediately, I felt like Jill jumped on me about how long I had been working on my line. I didn't even know how to react. At that point, I didn't really have the verbal tactics. When I felt backed into a corner, I would say the wrong thing or just fumfer. Or I would sit there and take it because the verbal abuse I witnessed as a child. When you have a history of abuse, you tend to shut down when you feel attacked. You don't fight back. You go into a state of numbness. I should have said, Stop. You're hurting my feelings. What you're saying and how you're treating me isn't right. Now I'm more in control and I know how to handle myself better. But at the time, I just shut down. I remember some people writing in after that episode aired to say that the way they went after me was vicious. I think Jill is the type of person who can sniff out someone's weaknesses like a dog. I feel like she saw the chink in my armor and pounced. We taped for 7 hours that day, and the next day, I couldn't get out of bed. When I got home, I said to Mario, I can't do this anymore. Taping these reunions is as painful as giving birth. I remember he laughed and said, Well, then the memory of the pain will go away. After that reunion episode, I did a lot of soul searching. When I decided when I decided to sign on for season 3, I said to my family, I'm going to be me now. I have to be more expressive and show who I really am. I'm not going to rein myself in. I had finally realized that I needed to be myself because me is very entertaining. I'm funny, I'm witty, I'm upbeat. On the other hand, I also become aware of how my impulsive side could affect the other women on the show. While spontaneity can be a good thing, being impulsive means that before you act, which can have the consequence of hurting people's feelings, I can definitely be insensitive, but it is never my intention to hurt anyone. So for season 3, I revealed a whole new Ramona. I was determined to be true to myself, but I also embraced a philosophy of renewal in all aspects of my life. I cut my hair, renewed my vows with my husband, and started re-examining my relationships with the other women on the show. I dropped my judgmental attitude about Alex and Simon, and we actually ended up developing a meaningful friendship. Initially, it was awkward for me to be around them. I felt as though Alex and Simon had invaded my territory. It takes too much effort to be polite and make small talk with someone I don't like, and I don't know how to be fake and pretend to be friendly. So if they came to an event that I was attending, I just found it easier to leave or go to the other side of the room. When Simon approached me at the Russell Simmons fashion show and asked me outright why I didn't like him, I was completely taken aback. In retrospect, I'm glad he confronted me because I was able to say exactly what was on my mind. Even though my opinion of him didn't change right away, it cleared a path for a friendship to develop. Now I can see that a big part of why I reacted so negatively to them was in part because they were from Brooklyn. It had a bad connotation for me, but I had buried my memories of going there so deeply that I didn't make the connection right away. When I finally went to Brooklyn, I began to remember the time my mom took us to stay with my grandmother after my father had hit her. Suddenly, it came clear to me that I was projecting my own issues onto them. Once I realized that, it changed everything for me. I stopped judging Alex and Simon, and we became very good friends. I came to realize that Alex is a happy, grounded, secure, and self-confident woman. She is not threatened or intimidated by other people's success. I think we learned a lot from one another on our time together on the show, and it was great to watch her come out of her shell. I encouraged her to become a stronger and more outspoken version of herself, and by the end of season 3, she had found her voice. That season was also a turning point in my friendship with Bethany, beginning with the day we walked across the Bridge. When the episode aired, it was very upsetting for me to hear the things I had said to her. I told her that she didn't have any friends and that she would probably screw up her relationship with her then boyfriend, Jason. Even though our conversation leading up to this moment was heated and we were both exchanging barbs, the bottom line is that she came to me with a situation that was troubling her, and she needed my sympathy and support. Instead, I became defensive and lashed out, hitting below the belt, just like my father had done. I had to own up to my behavior and I apologized to Bethany. We got past it and we are now genuine friends. Bethany and I are very similar. We both grew up with a lot of tension in our households. We both had terrible relationships with our fathers. We're both street smart, ambitious, and self made. We both got married and had children in our late 30s. There are a lot of parallels there. While walking across the bridge that day, I finally took in the distress and pain she was feeling over her fallout with Jill. I had never seen her so upset, and I was genuinely concerned, which is why I came up with a plan for her to meet with Jill at my house. I was hoping they would hash out their issues and make peace with one another. I really wanted them to find a way to rebuild their friendship. I knew the situation was causing them both pain, and they needed to make amends. Never in a million years did I think they would leave my home without coming to a resolution. I think what happened between them was that Jill was resentful that Bravo had offered Bethany her own show. We all knew it was happening. I remember the plan was for her to film season 3 with us, and then she would start filming her spinoff. Maybe Jill thought it would be the Jill and Bethany show, or that she would have gotten her own show. But I remember her calling me up in my office and asking me to not film with Bethany. I said to her, "Why would you want to hurt her that way? You know she's on her own and she has to support herself. You have a husband. I'm set financially. Why would you stand in her way?" I think she felt that Bethany was riding our coattails, and she was jealous that she would have her success on her own. Alex and I confronted her about this during the reunion episode. At first, Jill denied she had done this, but eventually she did admit it. I think Jill is the type of person that if you have something she doesn't have, instead of wishing you well, she feels slighted that she's not a part of it. That's just her personality. Although it's often riled me up over the years, I've learned to accept her for who she is. I do believe that if Jill and Bethany had more time to talk that day, they might have eventually reconciled. Looking back, I should have left the apartment with Luann so they could have a chance to work things out on their own. I don't think Luann was a positive presence that day. She and Jill had recently become close, and I think subconsciously she may have felt their new friendship would be threatened if Jill and Bethany became friends again. I really feel that she inserted herself into the situation and prevented them from finishing their conversation. When Jill walked out that day, the door closed on their friendship for good. This is an issue that would come up when Sonia and I had become close. I think it's hard for Luann to share friends. It's a common mistake we women make. We get possessive and territorial, but women should not feel threatened by other women's friendships. Friends are meant to be shared. There really is enough love to go around. When Kelly joined us on the show, I knew of her but had never met her. She was very prominent socially because of her ex-husband, the famous French fashion photographer Gilles Ben Simon. Before I met, I actually Googled her and listened to some of her interviews. She seemed like she was nice and engaging, and my initial reaction to her was positive. But the more I got to know her, the more I felt that there was no depth to her. I felt like as long as she could talk about children and nail polish and clothes, she was fine. But beyond that, she didn't seem to have anything substantial to say. So I found a real conversation with her difficult. Right away, there was friction between Bethany and Kelly, where Kelly was a true socialite it girl who was always invited to all the A-list parties. Bethany was this scrappy, self-made street urchin who was working her way to the top. There was a lot of resentment there because they had met a number of times, but Kelly would always act like she didn't remember, and probably Kelly didn't remember because she couldn't have cared less about Bethany. The tension between them had been simmering since Kelly's infamous "I'm up here, you're down there" hand gesture during their confrontation at Brass Monkey, but it blew way the hell up in St. Thomas. I was about to renew my vows, and I thought it would be fun for all of us to go away together and celebrate. I had not gone on a girls' trip since I married Mario, and I was looking forward to spending time with the ladies. When I picked Sonia up, I was so excited I could hardly contain myself. I knew we would feed off each other's positive energy, and it was on this trip that Ramona was born. Bethany's father had just passed away, and she had also recently found out she was pregnant. So when she called to say she could go, I was touched. Alex had never been away from her two young boys, so I was really appreciative that she had agreed to come. I knew it would be therapeutic for them both to get away and just relax. I even decided to put aside my issues with Kelly and invited her to come. I was disappointed that Jill and Luann didn't come with us, but I chose not to dwell on it. Once we were all together on the yacht, I was so over the top happy and excited. We were all getting along, chatting, and naturally we began talking about our feelings for Jill and how her behavior had been affecting us. This seemed to immediately make Kelly uncomfortable because she kept saying she didn't want to talk about feelings. I think Kelly has a hard time conversing in intimate situations, especially when the subject of emotions comes up. The way I see it, if you have no feelings and you cannot talk about them or be in touch with them, then you might as well be a robot. While we were there on the yacht, I remember Kelly was on the phone with Jill 3 or 4 times a day. She seemed to be getting increasingly agitated, and I think some of that may have been Jill stirring her up. For the next part of our trip, we stayed at Presidio Del Mar, a majestic villa in St. John. I'm not easily impressed, but I have to say this villa was beyond anything I had ever visited or seen. The cameras didn't even begin to do it justice. The following morning, Kelly seemed to have calmed down, and that day we spent on the beach with her was amazing. She prepared a great lunch and treated us to a fantastic photo shoot. She was at ease in her own element and was a pleasure to be with. But at dinner that night, something in her snapped. Suddenly, out of nowhere, she seemed to be in the midst of a major meltdown. I don't know what caused it. Maybe she was just out of her comfort zone, but we all wondered if she had forgotten to take her medication or if perhaps she had mixed some kind of medication with too much alcohol. We were drinking tequila on the beach that day, and she doesn't really drink. Tequila makes me nutty, so maybe it had a strange effect on her. I personally felt the meltdown was 20 times worse than what they aired on television. We were so concerned that we called Jill that night and told her, Kelly needs you. She's going to be on a plane. You should meet her in New York. Even Bethany got on the phone and said, Jill, this is not about the show. We're worried about Kelly. But instead of meeting her friend and helping her at the airport, Jill decided to show up at the villa the next day. I guess she thought she was going to swoop in and have some kind of reconciliation with Bethany, but it was a little too late. Bethany and I have come a long way, but it hasn't always been easy for us. She has this way of making her digs through her sense of humor, so you almost don't realize that she's insulting you. That's her stick, and she's excellent at it. She comes across like a comedian, but her words can be quite biting. Part of our confrontation at the season 2 reunion had to do with my response to a biting comment she made when I was giving her dating advice. I was hurt by what she said, so in my blog, I made the dig, why buy the milk if you can get the cow for free, in reference to her having previously lived with boyfriends outside of marriage. She got really pissed off about that. I remember she called me up. She actually scared the crap out of me, and then I felt threatened when she and Jill went after me at the reunion. She seemed like a cat ready to scratch my eyes out. It takes a lot to shake me up, but Bethany's a person that you just don't cross. She can dish it out, but she can't take it. We're in a much different place now. I think it's because my walls are down and I'm more communicative. The Ramona I am today might have said, "Come on, Bethany, don't take this so seriously. I'm sorry you're offended." But back then, I panicked and retreated. I literally went under my covers like when I was a child and my parents would fight. Now I handle things differently. I've learned to communicate better. Early into the filming of season 7, Bethany and I got into a huge fight, but I realized very quickly, what are we fighting about? This is ridiculous. The old Ramona would have said, "Okay, we had a fight. I'm angry at her. She's angry at me. So be it. So be it." The issue would have festered and we might have damaged our friendship for good. But the person I am now, I decided to go see her and try to reconcile right away. Of course, she got even angrier, but I kept calm and approached her again. And in the end, we made up. Sometimes people are just angry, not at you, but about their situation. In the past, I never saw things that way. I would take things way too personally, but I've evolved. Recently, Luann said to me, "Ramona, you're so warm and fuzzy now. Who would have thought?" Luann would call me warm and fuzzy. I think that going through what I went through with my marriage falling apart has made me a different person. When you're emotionally hurt like that, when you're betrayed by your husband, it makes you more vulnerable. You can retreat or you can learn from it. It was a learning experience, not a good one, but life is learning. What is a friend? A friend is someone who is there for you through the good, the bad, and the ugly. Someone who allows you to express yourself and someone who forgives you for your mistakes. No one is perfect. I know I still have a lot of growing up to do, but I am trying. I am a very emotional person. I'm remotional. There's nothing wishy-washy about me. I am very passionate. There are no gray areas with me. I am an extremist. I argue hard and I make up harder. I ignite quickly, but when a disagreement is over, it's over. And I do not hold grudges because life is too short.